So the passing game not only needs to tier up, it needs to take maybe a step beyond that. The beauty of this is like you're an NFL GM right now with a rookie contract at QB. And that's almost always when you make your Super Bowl runs because you're not paying your QB the lion's share of the salary. So you have the opportunity here to really attack the market in terms of bringing in receivers.
Welcome back to the ANF Podcast. Today we're going to do a breakdown of Iowa versus USC. And then instead of doing a preview of Iowa versus Michigan State, we're going to do a state of the program, essentially a recap of the 10 games we've seen so far, what that means for the program, what we've done really well, what we've done really poorly. And then I can kind of project out what we want to see from an off-season acquisition perspective and then also what we can expect from a developmental perspective on this team. I think what we could start off with, though, is what did USC do at an exceptional level? And I think we can kick it over to you just to outline various plays that reflect that.
It wasn't an exceptional scheme to get Lane and Lemon open. Definitely unique in how they attacked us in terms of downfield passing. But more so, it was the personnel that was exceptional. And to break out in the first play that highlights how unique of a personnel and skill set they had with Maeva, Lane, and Lemon was a critical down in 3rd and 7 when it was 21-13 on our side of the field. And a key concept that's going to come up in this breakdown is that we didn't generate pressure from our D tackles and really get into Maeva's feet a lot. But this is just a simple mesh concept with Lane on a drag route to around 6 yards where they're just trying to pick up the first down through 3 different combination routes over the middle. But at the end of it, since we don't pressure Maeva and he is able to extend the play, Lane cuts upfield at the last second and then turns around for Maeva to find him. Shire is right there, but he turns his head and Maeva throws this like jump ball past Shire's head and Lane is able to sky and catch it. And it was one of like 6 or 7 catches or plays on offense where they just played outside the scheme. They played outside themselves, but it was such a high-level, unique talent for college football, stuff you would see on an NFL field and definitely would not see in the Big Ten West 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And even for this season, it felt like we were playing one of the most like just talented passing attacks in the country. And I think all 3 of those guys have a great shot at the NFL. And honestly, the Lemon aspect of this game and him is like, I feel very confident he's going to play in the NFL one day as, St. Brown or Abuka, just insane body control. And the second play I'll break down is just focused straight on him. And it's just, once again, not a great scheme to get him open. It is, quality in some sense, but when it's 21-7, we need to hold them to 0 points before they go, they get successive possessions. They run their classic counter fake where we always talk how they pulled guards to really put pressure on your linebackers. Then it's like a double release from their tight end and Lemon in the slot attacking a cover 3 high safety. So X is getting depth and is just supposed to sit right under him. Maeva kind of leads it too far and Lemon has to sky, take contact, catch the ball, tuck it, and hit the ground. And the ease he made this play look like, it blew my mind when they did the replay because you see it happen in the bang-bang fashion, and they're like, no way he caught that. And then they show the replay. His eyes are calm, his hands are calm, his body's calm. He jumps up. X doesn't even look like he's present. And this is a 6'1", 190 safety about to lay the wood on him, and everything looks like he's doing this in a practice field by himself. And it just highlights how talented these 3 guys were, and truly they were the difference makers in this game.
So you had a 2-score lead. You had what that dictates from Iowa is that now they're going to really want to slow the pace down the game. They're going to want to force execution. What that avails yourself to is if you have any misstep by the offense, you're going to be able then hopefully get the ball back. But if the offense is able to execute at a high level, they're going to be able to possess likely into the red zone. What the setup, though, was a lot of long developing first and second down throws that Maeva was, more than willing to accept that amount of time. He seemed incredibly comfortable back there. He wasn't racing to get the ball out. He was letting his routes develop downfield. One of them was the arching looper to Lemon on the sideline where he toe taps, 35 yards downfield. It's, again, that's execution that seems simple when you're watching it, but that is like a 1 in 10 chance for an Iowa team to hit something like that, maybe even less. But they're doing it, going out there, and it seems routine. The next was the seam shot against Lutmer, where Lutmer is grabbing on Lemon as he corrals this pass. And again, it's that timing and that slow motion matrix-like feeling of Lemon. This guy is like a 5'10", 180-pound receiver, but just over and over made plays that it'd be tough to find these plays in the NFL on a routine basis. And he probably made 5 or 6 of them were at that level. I think schematically, the 2 plays I had an issue with that could have led to a better result for Iowa is this. One of them occurred in the first half. I believe it was maybe 14-0 at the time, but you had a boot out 2-man concept by Maeva. You actually get a fairly good pressure rep by Max Llewellyn. There's got to be a rule within Iowa's defensive scheme book. Jumping to bat a ball, that's an in the pocket move. That only happens when you're playing a timed QB. They're trying to throw a slant route over the middle. You're not really harming yourself by jumping up and trying to swat something. If you get to the edge and a guy is trying to extend the play, your first imperative should be contain. Let me get my body to him, force a throw off platform, and get a hit on him. It should not be, I'm going to try and get a bat down 20 yards outside the tackle box. That ends up killing you. You end up completing the off-schedule throw to lane. The next is their touchdown to Lemon later in the game, where they run a play-action set where Lemon comes across the field. Entringer is, since it's either a cover 3 or cover 4, we weren't able to decipher which one, but Entringer is free on this play. He flows to almost like a buzz look at cover 3. Because you have Lutmer to the flat outside of you, and you know that your flat responsibility is covered, your eyes should be coming actually behind you. You should be looking to crossing routes that are coming across the field. You're trying to help out your free safety in the scenario. If he's able to get his eyes back earlier and come help support X on this play, this should not be a touchdown. You could tell afterwards he's very frustrated because he knew that was his responsibility. But I think in the aggregate, when you look at what Iowa did well and what Iowa did not do well, again, you had a 2-score lead. You wanted to force them into red zone stops. But as this game developed, you kind of fell into this first and second down approach that Purdue of Jeff Brom's team used to get into, where if they can anticipate bull rushes from your DNs and D tackles, now they can bake in very long developing routes at 10, 15, 20 yards. And what this sets up is, unless you're sitting in cover 4, cover 3, long developing routes, these guys are now on islands down the field. And if you have a strong arm QB who's hyper accurate with receivers that can put pressure on you down the field, these pockets in that cover 3 space become, fairly large. And that was where the defense started to fall apart. Was you're allowing too much development in these plays. You're not baking any pass rushes on first and second down. And they were able to execute at a high level. A lot of it was like just off schedule. And, they were able to throw at 9, 10 yards. And I understand that process. Even when it was going on, Phil's probably like, that's fine. We're catching and tackling. That's fine. We're catching and tackling. We just need to make stops in the red zone. But again, they're doing the pace game too. So then you're not going to be as dominant of a red zone run team too. So it sucked the way it played out, but there are things you can do better at. And I think it comes down to first and second round aggression against the pass. Yeah.
And it's tough because you have this 2-score lead. You are up 21-7. You feel confident with your run game and you feel confident with the offense. So Phil's mantra probably when it is 21-7 is long drives. Even if they result in touchdowns, make them go 10 plays. No 1-play, 2-play touchdowns. So we should be running a 4-man pass, rush the entire time, backing up in our, quarter sets. The issue with that is you went, effective drive right before half, cut it to 21-10. They got rhythm because they scored a touchdown the possession prior. So that's back-to-back scores. Then another rhythm-based drive where they look confident in the first half or in the second half of their first drive. That's 3 straight scoring drives. And then you don't get the requisite drives back from the offense, which was anticipated by playing this style. You went into halftime rushing for the numbers you did. You're looking down at the stat sheet and your yards per carry is at such a level that it's hard to blame Phil for not making that adjustment to become more aggressive because he needs to allow his offense to help him out. And you scored 21 points in the first half with a few short fields, but you were running the ball to the point where you expect to have production in the second half where, in my opinion, watching the game back, after they go 3 straight scoring drives with touchdown, field goal, and we pump back to them, I'm bringing 5 every time. And it's something we didn't see against Oregon, but we did see against Indiana. And it's odd that we didn't make that adjustment to just turn the aggression up a little bit. These guys are not playing a quick hitting game where they're pushing you down the ball downfield. They're playing this development game where Maeva is clearing the pocket and then finding these receivers in one-on-one situations. I just wish that when they did get the ball back at 21-13, you're bringing a linebacker pretty much every time to, like, there's almost no downside to playing cover 3 looks in that position because they're functioning so well in the run game as well. And the one play we can break out is there was a lot of creative things they did in this game. One thing I noticed was they brought on this like extra tackle that didn't trigger us to sub. So they would bring on 97, I think he would sub in as a tight end, but an eligible number, 90s are eligible, but it wouldn't trigger us to get out of our 4-2-5. And so they found some rule that where they could bring an extra body on, but it wouldn't have this automatic sub from us because you're subbing a tight end, not subbing like a,
But he was a lineman.
But he was a lineman, but he technically was an eligible receiver. So that was a really creative thing by Riley, what he did. And we can try, hopefully find a clip of that.
We have for the short yardage.
Short yardage. Yeah. But this run game also kind of was chewing the second half too. They were doing no wrong on offense. And one concept I would really love to ask Phil about and these defensive coordinators about on Iowa is this mock power we're seeing over and over. We saw it against Iowa State. We saw Oregon run it a bunch prior to Iowa and then faked it a few times against Iowa as well. But this mock power is a pulling right guard. They're in a 12 personnel set with the left side essentially open, just one tight end over there. They have a tight end in the bastard out to the right that ends up motioning back and ends up lead blocking to the corner on the opposite side. But I don't know how you would coach this in practice. It's something that Iowa needs to focus on in the spring to stop because it's becoming so prevalent in these offensive schemes. But what this play is you pull the guard, so you're signaling, we've broken this out in the podcast a few times, when a guard pulls and a D-end is left because there's a down block. So the tight end and the tackle are down blocking on that side. The D-end is now in space. The only way a 4-3 tech can really play in this situation is to crowd that hole, shrink it by playing a slide technique and trying to fit that guard's inside shoulder to spill the technique. And that is what Iowa has run for perpetuity. That has always been our schematic way to handle power. But these teams now are faking that power, drawing your DN to come in, and the linebackers are feeling like it's going to come off C. But these plays are hitting off D. And the running back has no intention ever to cut off any of those blocks. He's just sweeping action to the sideline. It generates a number game. It generates a pileup on C gap where all fill defenders are going, it's going to C.
Yeah, you waste DN and both linebackers to C.
And this is one of those unique things where you probably can have linebackers taught to keep eyes on the running back in this situation because he's going to tell you where the hole is unless he presses it well.
Well, what my point would be for this is, yes, you are seeing, and I think why it works so well is it's going to short side. So you're not expecting something to hit outside D gap when it goes to the short side of the field, but you know that your DN's technique is to spill. Like you should be moving with a wider gate to this than your typical power fits, especially if you know there's a left side alignment tight end. So you should be anticipating a wall down there from as well. And that's who actually ends up picking up Shire is just Shire moves like he's moving to C, and then they get a wall down on him, and then Harrell runs into him as well. Mm-hmm. But the minute you see action moving opposite you have to trust that you're going to get a spill from your DN. That is the technique you should have in your mind is, okay, C gap is going to be closed down by Hurricane here. I need to take just, instead of going straight to C gap, I need to take a little bit of a loop to get over the top of this. And that just seems to be something that's not really repped out that well. Mm-hmm. We're too eager to fit power. We're too scared to get beat out of C gap. Yeah. And that's really been an issue that keeps on popping up. Going into now what Iowa did well, and I think if you following the touchdown when they went up 21-7, there was murmurs that this is going to be a blowout just because of the offense output and what we were seeing from the offensive line. Granted, you lost Stevens, I think, after he went up 21-7. You eventually lose Pieper and Dunker later in the game, and it's sad those guys weren't able to stay healthy for that final drive because the running game was so significant. But really, what this game came down to, and I think it's a great demonstration of why man schemes are kind of lazy football and how they can be easily manipulated. So I'll start off with just your basic inside zone look. This is on the drive to go up by, again, it's to go up 21-7, but it starts off at 14-7. You run your basic inside zone look at the right D tackle, and you see the most beautiful, again, this combo block between Pieper and Jones. I'm going to pour one out for when the season's done. They take this D tackle to 9 yards, and they use it as a battering ram at that weak side linebacker in 31. This entire drive was designed at 31, which is hilarious because that's who we called out as the weak link on this USC defense in particular, and it really played out. He had a horrible drive, and he just was not a strong player. But you had this incredible double team that moves up, and then you get Moulton through. They then answer with what eventually became like their base set for the game, which was this 6-front single high man look, where since all these guys are in man techniques, where they're falling short of from a gap fill perspective is their backside C fit. You don't have a high safety in zone. When you play man, inherently you end up shading to the strong side. Because everyone's lined up onto the strong side of the formation. And usually in traditional zone sets, you're more set up on we're weighted 75% strong side, but there's still, you have this benefit to the weak side in
maybe
zone.
In 60%.
Maybe in 60-40. So, but
yeah,
you always are in traditional zone sets, the weak side is actually more well protected than the strong side, and that really helps up your run fits. So what Iowa went to, and this was, the first one I'll break out to is just the perfect zone rep, is you're winning at all 6 positions up front. You run a outside zone left, but because Dunker can take this right DN vertical, now you get this backside cut to behind him that's perfect. What they were doing with the backside DN was they were accounting for Gronowski in the boot game the entire game. This is their way out of Gronowski run, was to run this 45-degree angle looping DN to prevent from QB boot. And that will break into why that changed in the second half, and Iowa didn't make an adjustment to that. But they ran this cutback to C gap out of outside zone looks probably 10 times in the first half. And they were doing it over and over and over again. And it's just because the overflow works against man-to-man. They don't have a backside C defender, and you're dominating up front. Like it was setting up idealistically. You then wrap it up the possession with a read option look at 31, where you're doing your slide technique with a tight end, and then he loops around and dodges the D end. Again, 31 has the roughest day, doesn't read any aspect of the play, doesn't even get himself involved. Vonnegut ends up blocking 18 on the looping action, and then you get down to the 4-yard line. You wrap it up with Philly. Iowa's version of it. RVZ probably makes the second best throw of the day, which we can't have.
Yeah.
But again, Philly works perfectly in man sets because you're not going to have a squat corner. You're not going to have a cover 3 DB on that corner. Your quarterback is going to run free. That's why you always see Philly renditions on the goal line, is because it's man concepts. There's no one to account for Gronowski. And that sequentially, when that happened, when he went run, Philly for a touchdown to go up by 14 on the road, that was where Iowa football probably peaked this year. And one of the critical pieces of this early game, the whole season, has been short yardage stops. You were talking about how you had that additional alignment that they snuck onto the field. In the first half, they were in that extra lineman, 6-0 lineman look, and you stayed in your nickel look on a 4th and 1 look. The reps on this play by everyone on that right side of the field was fantastic. So you're fitting like traditional power. So what's key is that your D tackle and D end, who are running these shoot techniques on the A gap and B gap, can not get washed upfield. And why that's so important is you'll see Shire from the weak side slide to the power look. And if that wall gets built up, now you have wash, and now Shire is going to be wasted. The other key piece of this is the rep by Lutmer. And we were really hard on Lutmer last week when he was set up on that short side of the field zone look by Oregon. He got blocked out he dodged the guard's block rather than taking it on. It's so funny that it comes back, pulling guard to Lutmer in a power look on 4th and 1. What does he do? He rips it an inside shoulder look, an absolutely perfect guard on corner, block technique, beats the guard, makes half tackle with Shire. Like that is just, the integration of this whole team. It's like you needed really good reps from Graves and Llewellyn on that side in short yardage. You had a great slide technique. So like on Shire's huddle, this is the play that I always identify as like, this is why he will be a high-level linebacker. When he flows...
Or safety, yeah.
No, Shire.
Shire, oh yeah.
When he flows to the ball and can lay out with speed, he's got great eyes for it. And he's got the athleticism for it, and it all played out in that one moment. Lutmer just showing unreal toughness, just a hell of a rep. The other play I want to break into is the married together scheme of this early Leicester offense. So right away against this off coverage zone look, Kyle pointed out in the pregame that this is very much a Wisconsin style of zone defense where you're playing off coverage, 4 high looks. What do you go to? You go to what you ran against Wisconsin on the second play of the game, which is that mock pitch to Weegan. Weegan went for like 10 against Wisconsin. Obviously something they're going to rep in on scout team. What you're trying to impact is actually the backside linebacker here. So 31, he can't see that this pitch is coming, but he can feel the pressure. You had a motion with DJV, or not DJV, but one of the tight ends across the field to an overload. It's got all this pressure of we have a guy with pace moving outside to an unprotected edge. He just doesn't pick up that it wasn't pitched. He's sliding ever so slightly, and then you race DJV across his face and you hit a quick drag route to him. I love these aspects that Leicester's building in. Is he likes to push your buttons of weakness right away in games, and he's also doing it through a married through scheme. We've had multiple times where these plays are really fitting together early, and it's just a great way of putting the defensive players in insecurity right from the jump. It's like, I'm showing you something you saw, and now we're going to flip it on you, and now you're kind of in this turmoil state where it's like, man, they are really well integrated. This is I can't trust my eyes right away, which I think is a huge part of defense. Is like we're not just seeing the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah,
it's all working fluidly.
And it's just a good idea of like how to structure that play. Obviously, it's a gadget play with Weegan in that position, something that you have to install during the year, but he is drawing up 5 plays around it as well. So even though it's like a one-off, it feels like a one-off, he clearly has counters that he's built in his original design as well. So that's awesome to see. I'd say we actually have to adjust that. You called out the 6-man offensive line, and that's something Iowa has to solve right now because that's going to be used against us again. If they're subbing a tight end with an offensive lineman, we need to get out of our 4-2-5 instantly. You have to. So I hope Iowa realizes that they're doing this like kind of tricky way to keep us in a lighter look against 6 offensive linemen. That has to be a quick sub because they're clearly bringing somebody on. So we have the opportunity to. You have to just answer that right away. So that's just a little tweak that if Riley's doing it, Nebraska's
downstream's coming.
It's coming. So.
Yeah. It just was a very frustrating, and it really came down to Iowa not adjusting their boot techniques to that backside DN flowing down the field, and they were able to sit in 8-man boxes, and at some point you just had to rely on the Gronowski boot, and it just never came.
Yeah, I know where you're going with that we should be booting more because you saw so many down the line DN reps, especially on that last drive where this guy has impunity to run it down. And we can go back to even the Leicester breakdown, the first video we did this year of watching TJ Watt go down the line against us in 2016, it would have been, and having no pressure horizontally to stop that. And to be now in the biggest drive of the game, and even against Oregon too, if you watch the 1st and 10 on the goal line, 44 comes down the line with impunity and aggressiveness. And I know what you're saying. I get what you're saying. You need to have some sort of a boot action there to stop it, but there's still a body there on the backside. If he's operating that way, it's a linebacker. He's not as...
It's 18.
It's 18
in space.
It's just because it's an 8-man box. So you still have
so then the thought is that
coverage. Yeah,
he has. Well, if you get Gronowski to an edge clean, you're not certainly getting an edge pressure blitz at him.
Yeah.
Now you have to trust him in a throwing action, and that's really where I could break into what happened there. So
I can go. I know that play calling down the stretch was probably where we fell short in 8-man boxes, but it's personnel. That's where we fell short. And that's what really, it sucks to be back in the spot 6-4 post UCLA last year, where Gronowski's starting to look more like Sullivan every day, where you really had this runner but the passing game it's a hopeful, endeavor that hasn't improved to a point of consistency in big moments and consistency in drives extending third and short. And everything that we thought prior, after week one, where, all right, pass rush needs to be a little better. Passing game, short yardage, passing third and 5 is going to be an adventure every time. You just have like super strengths, and then you have like when you're competing against these top 15 teams, the difference of what Oregon, how they attacked with the passing game, the difference in Iowa State, the difference in Indiana, the difference in USC was their passing tackle was not just like quality and a head above Iowa. It's like 2 heads above.
This might be the biggest deviation in passing attacks in the country.
Yeah,
probably is, right?
You really want to compete at this level. We said like Lester, everything we're doing is perfect Ferentz ball, and it is, and that it played out in this game. You were dominant in the run game. You had this running back at QB that just gave you a lot of advantages, but at some point you need the personnel to also scare this coordinator not from going nuclear. But you can go into deeper what the actual results were.
So why this is so frustrating is we're going to look back on this team and say, against every team besides Indiana, you were able to dictate 8-man boxes with man-to-man pressure looks outside. If you can get a defense to get that look, which is essentially as aggressive as you can align between the 20s, what you're going to need to then execute within the passing game isn't high level. When you get to that pressure look, all you really need to set up then is a 15-yard in, and you set it up. You had the 8-man box, outside man pressure, single high safety look. What do you go to? This is the looks we saw against Rutgers, where you run a 7-man protection out of a deep set play action set. You get an in-breaking route from Weegan, and this was the critical juncture of the game, is you get your best player a perfect inside release. If he's able to complete this pass, and you're able to get Weegan on with pace outside of him, he can house this for a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a touchdown-worthy play because you have inside leverage with man-to-man. This is not a hard throw for most college QBs. But the issue with Gronowski is he wants to throw lasers at 20, and that leads to the tip getting, facing down, and that's why you see these dirts over and over again, is there's no touch to his pass. He's never putting an arc on any of these throws, and that's where you're not seeing touch out of him. And this has to have... It doesn't have to have a ton of touch because you really want to have pace on it, but it needs to have an arc to it, just a slight amount. Mm-hmm. The other one is, again, what was required from this passing game wasn't that high level. Mm-hmm. It was, kind of your basic stuff. With how they were aligned against Weegan, we broke out how traditionally how they wanted to do it was these man looks with a high safety. So what we went to was then an RPO screen game. And if you can get the ball to Weegan on the one particular rep I'm thinking of, RZ puts out a touchdown-worthy block on the edge. You get 25, their small corner that we broke out. He's a really tiny guy on your best blocking receiver, and RZ about puts him in the bench. The amount of space that would have created if you could put this on Weegan's chest rather than him have to scoop it off the ground is now he's in a one-on-one with the entire ocean of space behind him, and now, like, again, you had the ability to do very simplistic things because of the pressure you're dictating with your offensive run game. And I think this is we can go into now, thoughts of the future, but
yeah.
Next time you're looking for an all-inclusive beach vacation, consider Via Puesta del Sol or Via Puerto Escondido, both of which overlook the Pacific Ocean in Ocotal, Costa Rica, providing an exceptional all-inclusive experience for your family and friends. Visit their website, linked down below, for more information or to reserve your trip today. The ANF Podcast is sponsored by Eye Surgeons Associates, proudly serving Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois for all your eye care needs for over 40 years.
You don't need to be USC. You don't need to be Oregon, Indiana, Iowa State if you can continue to throw out a rushing attack with a rushing QB. I think the key piece here is you do want Gronowski-like guys. You do want guys who can really dictate pressure to opposite D gaps. Mm-hmm. And then that's going to eventually lead to significant rolls. When you get into these man sets and 8-man boxes with single high safeties, now you need to have crossing route receivers who have dangerous with pace, and you need a QB who can make those throws. And that's your only equation you need. Mm-hmm. Granted, there's even an evolution above that. But if you want to be a playoff team, and I think that's really the ceiling of this program where the fan base would be comfortable with where you're at.
Oh, very.
Is you need 2 dogs at receiver. Yeah. And you're going to need to pay up for them.
Well, I think that's a great way to say it. I think we're all on the same page as Iowa fans. You have realities of NIL. You have realities of historic success. You have realities of recruiting bases. Playoffs is the pinnacle of this program. We're not expecting you to go win 3 games in the playoffs and make the semis. We're not expecting you to go compete against a $40 million roster on a neutral field against Ohio State, the pedigree they bring in. So I think we're all on the same page. A playoff appearance is what the goal is. And we're close, but we're not. That's where we were close prior to Oregon in my mind. It felt like this was peak Ferentz ball. It felt like we had the opportunity to be that 12th team in the country, be that 10th team in the country if we get some bounces. And after this game, it felt like we were retracting back to that sitting in the 20s pretty comfortably without a legit passing attack. Because if you're another outside team, you're USC, you're Michigan, you're these other competing teams, any of the SEC teams that are kind of in that same view, you're like,
if you could throw out real bodies in the D-line and linebacker, you're not threatened by this team at all.
Yeah. And so what they'll say is like, well, they can't throw. It's like, well, we have this great horizontal scheme and a running QB and a great offensive line with a bevy of backs. But when it's such a simple way to discount Iowa, but what it is still true, even against a USC defense that sits in the 40s, when they make their adjustment, and honestly, if you go back to even the Minnesota game, when they made their adjustment, when they were down 10-0, everything started to look a lot harder too. Like we were fortunate to hop early in that game because the adjustments they made, they were starting to run with this as well. And obviously, RBC's touchdown was a great throw and catch, but he was blanketed. Like that, there was a game breaking out in that second quarter where we didn't look comfortable getting open either. And it just, is that going to change dramatically next year? You almost sound like a crazy person saying, actually, quarterback and receiver at Iowa is going to be better next year. And that's the requirement going into the next offseason is, can you tell that story differently? And you have the opportunity with NIL. We can talk about how you change that narrative. And it is, if you talk about being a playoff team, it is essentially the last step here. Because you have to expect that your offensive line is going to take a slight step back with Dunker, Jones, and Stevens leaving, guys who've been developed for 3 or 4 years and all going to play in the NFL in some aspect. You lose Gronowski's power run game, which is another huge aspect of this run game because you can run them in A-gap. That is not something most quarterbacks can do. So the passing game not only needs to tier up, it needs to take maybe a step beyond that. And the beauty of this is like you're an NFL GM right now with a rookie contract at QB. And that's almost always when you make your Super Bowl runs because you're not paying your QB the lion's share of the salary. So you have the opportunity here to really attack the market in terms of bringing in receivers. And if you want to go into discussion of Connor's wife does executive recruiting, and this receiver position is an executive recruiting opportunity.
Yeah. So when you have like a manufacturing job CEO in bumfuck Ohio, if you're going to draw a talent in to that area where they're going to have to travel to town, Tuesday to Thursday, 3 weeks out of the year, you have to pay a premium for that position. And that's how you can view Iowa's receiver position is you should be looking at upperclassmen with demonstrated talent. You should be looking at guys who have the capabilities of going to the NFL. That is your base proposition. If you want to be a top 30 personnel, because the stats aren't going to be reflective here. So these guys are going to have to understand this is still a ball possession team. It's going to be a bit like when Wisconsin had there are 1 or 2 guys that would get the lion's share of the carries or the receptions, but still be very productive. And truly, you might just have a single guy, and then you need a backup for that single guy. But the story you need is that this guy has to have the potential of being an NFL receiver. If you want to win 10 games next year, if you want to win 11 games next year, if you want to have the potential to not only get to the playoff, but win a game in the playoff, is when you are able to dictate this 8-man front with man pressure, he has to be a 6-foot receiver to 6'2", with the ability to be physical enough over the middle where he can get off in an inside man rep zone. You got to be able to see him when he's crossing the field. That's yesterday you had Weegan going over the middle at 5'8", 5'9", and Grano doesn't feel like he can high point that ball. He's got to keep it on the laser for him as well. But he's got to be able to run away from that guy, and he's got to be able to put the pressure of, I can't line up in man-to-man with the whole field. This guy could go for 70 on me. Mm-hmm. If you are able to find those two guys, you need two of them. The rest of the offense might not garner a single other acquisition, truly. Maybe you think about picking up an interior O-guard, but still, you have guys in the cooker. You're developing at a great level.
I think you treat it like a GM in that situation where we're going to trust our draft essentially to build out. That's your recruiting base. Trust the positions you do well to not spend money on those. If you're talking about just lion's share of cost on offense, you have the draft of your recruiting base of your O-line. You have Vonnegut next year, which is, he's really starting to develop into somebody that looks like he's going to play in the NFL possibly after next year. It could be one of those situations where he's like a Hawkinson, where he's a redshirt sophomore. He has a freak offseason, and he has the opportunity to go just because how athletic he is and if his blocking picks up. But you said it best. Like, you have your, cap essentially. You have draft capital everywhere else. These are guys you're on your standard contracts. Treat it like an NFL GM where, like, how do we take the next step? And, when you're breaking all this stuff down, you're like, it's so simplistic. Go get the big dogs. But that selling point that whoever's going to handle that general manager role, obviously Barnes is going to be focused on it, but like whoever's negotiating these contracts, I think we brought in a lot of advisors from the NFL. More like executive recruiting to Bumfuck, Ohio. What does that really look like? Yes, it looks like a premium contract. Yes, it's all about the story and trying to connect this with this team. But then it's also like he has to step onto this team being the highest paid player and like making the least amount of plays in some cases too. And you're also sacrificing like Kirk's entire idea of this program. You invest in seniors, they develop. It's all about culture. It's about team. This is like a deviation in like 3 different aspects. It's not just a deviation in one aspect. It's a deviation from essentially the thesis of this program. And also, you probably want, the way we've developed, you're now talking about a market that's probably FCS or MAC, right? We're not going to be wanting to grab guys from the higher programs that have burnt out to bring here. We have failed that in the past. Thus, I think we've changed our recruiting idea to target these smaller schools. So you're now looking for a guy who is willing not to have more than 30 catches in a year from the FCS.
I don't think it's 30.
But he has also NFL aspirations. 40 catches.
45.
40. I mean, 45 would be a lot. That'd be a hell of a year at Iowa. So you're talking about like segment, like, and then also breaking tradition. So if it doesn't happen, I get it. But it's when we posted like, hey, we're going to do a state of the program episode, we had 15 responses, receivers. It's written on the wall for this program. And you look at like what McCollum's doing defensively at Iowa basketball, how it's just complete culture shift and embracing defense and embracing the emotion of this program. And that flip, it happens. Like stubbornness in this moment, like where you want to just change something about your team is like, you kind of just have to evolve a little bit. It's not a big evolution. You don't have to change how you completely fundamentally think about your roster building, but there is like a glaring, obvious choice here. And from the fans' perspective.
I don't think you even need to put on the fans' perspective. I'm sure the coach and staff have seen it. They just know the realities of the team.
Yeah.
But again, it just then apply, how do you get that executive?
Yeah.
It's you pay a premium. And that's a risky endeavor for a lot of reasons that we just broken out. Injuries high at receiver. A guy not getting paid and not playing is also a risk. Mm-hmm. You're not utilizing him in every single facet, but this is where you are legitimately 2 star receivers away from competing at the highest level of college football.
On offense, yeah, for sure.
No doubt.
Yeah.
The pressures you were able to put on teams this year in your run game, I know it's going to take a step back.
Yeah.
But that's integral to how you practice, develop, teach, like practice time devoted to getting tougher, all that. All you then need to set up is then a receiver who can run a deep end against man-to-man. That's not, you're not having to dedicate more practice time to that. Mm-hmm. He just has to get open.
Well, I mean, I think you want to go a recall of a certain, like a unique program, Georgia Tech, and running triple option had Demarius Thomas and Calvin Johnson. as their number one. And so if you want to sell, like how you would sell this position is you have an opportunity to be the alpha on this offense. It might be 10 balls, 8 balls a game in some cases, but you're going to be the guy. And we're going to target you as this like alpha receiver. And I know that we're saying like we're trying to compete for playoffs, but the run game is like my concern next year is that if you don't upgrade at receiver, you lose Mark's legs and all these concepts of a real physicality too at the end of these runs.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about injury even on QB reads.
Hecklinski can move really well. He's a quick guy. But like anything A, B, even C gap is like, do we want that? So it's like almost like a read or a boot situation where you're only attacking off D far away from everything else. And then you lose 3 NFL linemen. Like and lose large too as a blocker. Like this, we had to kind of capitalize on this Ferentz ball aspect where you had a really strong offensive line. It'll be interesting what it looks like next year. I think there's still some expectations for the group just because Pieper and Lauck have been so good. But just the need for this, because if you don't acquire high-level receivers, there's a chance you take a step back, sitting back on that 60s range of efficiency and offense. And that's not competing for anything when you're at that level.
Well, I think we can move to defense because we've kind of beat the horse to death here. But again, you're really well situated on defense. You have a young core of linebackers. Maybe you think about picking up a weak side guy. But again, I'm always wary of adding bodies outside of D tackle on the defense because the defensive scheme is so particularly run. Mm-hmm. Like you just don't see guys rise up as transfers because Phil has an idea of how he wants guys to play, doesn't want bad habits being filled in. And that's why you just don't see guys ascend outside of Nick Jackson.
Yeah,
it's brought a litany of corners that just never arise. Maybe you think about a safety too for some depth, but that's not going to be a big expenditure. Expenditure standpoint, where you were at with D tackle, you had Pace, Hawthorne, and Graves this year. A good D tackle group, not a great. Mm-hmm. You didn't really hold up in the run game in some large moments. You broke down at moments, later in the game because of the lack of depth. Truthfully, I think you go 3 D tackles, and if it's not 3, it's 2 guys who can step in and start and play at a high level, move into all Big Ten, honorable mention. Mm-hmm. But you need to go find 2 guys that are 4th or 5th year players that have developed the strength, play within a similar technique, and understand what it's going to take. Because if you want to continue to back up on defense, putting reps on your defensive lineman legs, you need this now group to not be 3. It needs to be 4 or 5. And that helps you survive injury too. If guys are playing a little banged up, they don't have to be out there. So
you just don't have the bodies right now. It's Fitzgibbon, Kennedy, Hawthorne,
Hubert.
And so and then walk-ons. Yeah. And Fitzgibbon's going to be a redshirt freshman next year.
And Kennedy's going to be a redshirt sophomore.
And once again, this is another benefit for this, capital on this defense. Your DNs have been sitting for a long time. You're going to go Allen, Merriweather at starting. They're going to be seniors. You're going to have, or redshirt junior and a senior. You're going to have Anderson and Chineke behind them. They've been cooking for a while. And then you have Epineza. So you have like 5 guys that I legitimately have like, they're all going to be on NFL rosters at the start of a camp. 53-man rosters for all 5 is not likely, but they're all going to be close, and they've all been developed for a long time. Epeneza's just been sitting for an entire year. We know what his pedigree is. Linebacker, you have this crop of young guys in Buffington and Reese. You have Montgomery coming back. You have still the class above that. I think
Van Kekerk's.
Keeter's coming back to football, so you add that wrinkle into it. Like I want him at linebacker still. Secondary, you're good at corner. You have Lutmer, Lee coming back. Lee's taken a step up this last few weeks. Now he's going to be playing senior ball last year. And then
Watson, Moda,
Watson's been, and then the other kid from Florida. Godfrey. So there's bodies there. And then you bring back your best 2 players on the defense will be next year and Entringer and Lutmer. And so once again, you have that story where you just drafted well. If you're thinking as an NFL GM, you drafted well in a lot of positions. These guys are on contracts that you've drafted them on. Now it's just solely focused on D tackle acquisition. Once again, probably a really premium price to pay because we generally build our D tackles at $290. Pace was a guy you grabbed from Central Michigan. You need 300-pound bodies. Like you have to get there against Oregon. Just completely mowed down 290-pound D tackles all game. And you see in this USC game, we did not have the pressure you were generating just through bull rushes. And then at the end of the game, the rush game really took a toll as well because you're
playing too many snaps.
You're at a deficit to these bigger players. And if you really want to compete, if we're under the guys that Iowa fans want a playoff appearance, you need high-level, paid-for D-tackle play going into the next year. So it's the writing's on the wall. For fans, too, there's no kind of clear deficit of like where we need to spend money. You have this rookie contract. You want receivers, tough as hell to get. That's not an easy ask. D-tackle, tough as hell to get. There's not a lot of 330-pound bodies out there. So it is a hard ask for this staff. There is not an easy answer to who you want to acquire, given the formula that we want to grab guys from lower levels. But you should be focusing your expendable NIL on those two positions without a doubt.
See, I think those are two positions where you have, like, I know the guys coming down has not worked. You obviously, Cade and Caleb Brown did not work. But D-tackle recruitment, there's traditionally there's like 12 a year that can really play at a high level from an aggregate of all of college football. Like you're going to need to pay up, and you're going to need to look at the top 8 programs for those guys who are transferring out. Again, that's a reality. You're not going to pull a guy from Central Michigan that's going to come and dominate Oregon on the interior. That's a reality. Receivers, the same thing too. It's like you think about E.J. Williams from Indiana. Like, you know what we could use an E.J. Williams on this team with? He was a flame out from Clemson, but there are. Yeah. Again, it's going to be a personality deciphering. You're going to need to find out guys who are going to want to fit into the Iowa mold and are going to be able to take a back seat and come in and block. But there's also an element to this where you can sell blocking as a differentiator to the NFL as well. Like if you can make this Iowa toughness a receiver position as well, you're going to get taught at a super high level of how to keep leverage.
You're going to play a pro style offense.
You're going to play pro style offense. So the sell needs to be strong, but I do think that at the end of the day, it's going to take some money. But your benefit of this is that you can aggregate it to legitimately 4 guys.
Yeah.
And I know that this is not setting up the way you want it to. You want it to be, money spread out, guys developing within the program, but you need a couple of hired guns. And that's a reality of college football if you want to win at the highest level.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to do it well. Maybe you want to do it well and you could do it your way.
Yeah.
But there's slight alterations where because you're doing some things so freaking high level.
Yeah.
Like your short yardage runs have been so high level this year. Your deep rush defense, your rushing attack and short yardage and throughout the middle games has been like top 5 in the country. And you're not getting there.
If playoffs are the goal next year, acquisitions are clear, receiver, D-tackle, and development. I think the hard part too is like you've developed guys for 3 or 4 years that have NFL aspirations. And you actually expect those guys to be even more productive than who you're bringing in terms of like the expectations for the season. If you have Pieper on the team, who's like going to be an NFL guard or a center, or Epineza, or like Chineke, and then all of a sudden the guy who's being brought in is being paid more too. So I think there's just so much to think about when you're roster building. And when you bring in lower level guys and you pay them a decent amount, but probably, cost effective across all players, you remove that type of culture. So I do think that is like, if you're an Iowa fan and obviously us as well, clearly what you do is you overpay for these type of positions. Like Kirk would probably push back. It's like, well, how am I supposed to manage the team? Yeah, if you're going to have these hired guns that are making triple or quadruple, and they didn't have to go through this grind of Iowa football because they were at some program not hitting every week. They didn't go through 3 fall camps. And so I think that's where if I was sitting internally, I'd be pushing back on, be like, you guys don't know, how this actually operates. I have to go be around these people every day. I have to tell them they're going to talk amongst each other who's getting paid. And we work in corporate environments. If some guy got brought in who's actually worse than me, but making 3 times as much more and didn't have to grind through all the stuff we went through, I'd be pissed.
Well, maybe that's why you saw the team fall apart last year too.
Yeah.
Is you had the hired guns of Cade and Caleb Brown quit on the team effectively.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, what team is this?
Yeah.
Like, and that's where you saw a guy start sitting out. You saw, all of a sudden became the we before me, and the culture devolved. And that really, the culture this year has been fantastic.
Incredible.
So
yeah.
that really is a strong consideration.
Yeah.
Are you going to play a culture game and hope you can get done with the Jimmies and Joes you got? Or are you going to move into more of a NFL-like structured team? And it's
not as simplistic
as you want to make it out to be. But I think where we're sitting here compared to when you were at Michigan State and UCLA last year, where you felt like the defense was starting to fall apart, the offense wasn't doing anything different. As you moved into the offseason, reasons for optimism were very low. It's probably the lowest we've had in a while. Even after picking up Gronowski, but you knew that it was going to be a one-man show a little bit on offense. Where you're at now after these 4 games of being hyper competitive against good teams, you seem like you're building to something on offense. You're getting close. You're starting to, from a schematic standpoint, I think it's almost completely interwoven. Not a perfect schematic scheme, but it's damn near close. It's about 90% of what you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And then on a defensive perspective, you're really starting to see next year. You'll start to see this D line and waiting on start to emerge, especially at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to have a major impact on this team. And then maybe some of those young linebackers start to crop up too, because that's a group we're really excited for. So I think there's a lot of optimism. It's difficult to be in this position again where, futility and ranked wins, but you're looking better.
Mm-hmm.
And you're starting to build to something on offense with the second-year coordinator that seems sustainable.
Still a very important end of the season here too.
Yep.
You drop one to Michigan State, would be a huge upset. You drop one to Nebraska. You drop a bowl game that you shouldn't, maybe another ranked win loss. Like, it is important. 9-4 down the stretch here solidifies this narrative of close. You drop one of those last 2 games against a backup quarterback with Nebraska, or you have another bowl game against an SEC team goes awry. Momentum can get foggy too. So it is still a really critical last 3 games as well. Also, we want to give a shout out to Chad Leistico. We've been ingesting his content for a long time, and it was odd to be on the opposite side of that interview process. I've listened to his OC interview for at least the last 4 years, maybe even longer than that. And when the Zoom call started, I sat down and he asked the first question. I feel like, I've heard Lester answer these questions. I've heard Brian Ferentz answer them. So it was definitely a surreal moment. Really appreciate the opportunity to tell our story. And I think our story is something that, you guys probably connect with a lot. An Eastern Iowa kid born in the late 90s, had an obsession with Iowa because of the success they had from 2002 to 2004. And then that, obsession starts with extreme fandom even into your 30s and 40s. And it's not really fandom anymore. It's like a part of our culture, a part of our identity. And hopefully that story fleshes out where we don't view, this is a unique way to express our fandom in this, but I don't think it's unique in how Iowans have embraced this team and embraced this kind of culture to our people.
Yeah, the most normal I feel is on a kind of game day in the fall. It's a bunch of like-minded people with the exact same interest I have. It's all my family and friends around you, and then you're all going to the same, religious event.
Exactly. Yeah.
If anyone hasn't seen the article yet, it's on hawkcentral.com and is also in the Des Moines Register, and we'll put that link below in the description.
Yeah. And thanks again, Chad. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Really great to meet you.
Go Hawks.